We are less than 24 hours from the beginning of the playoffs at the Austin Major. Now that the pick'em videos are set up, the coins are no longer going to be diamond. It's time to sit down and take a closer look at our 4 quarterfinals matchups and get ready for the events to begin on Thursday. And thankfully, I'm not alone for this one. I am joined by the man who single-handedly manifested the downfall of the Falcons, the person who invented disc golf. I'm joined by Dust Moret. Dust, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm just glad that I could self-actualize and realize my true potential in the manipulating powers that I have, and I thought I could use them for the greatest good of the community, which was to see Falcons get eliminated. So you're welcome. Everyone.
Yeah, I mean, literally, did a service to the community that can never be repaid. Yeah. Dust is the oracle who understands all, so who else to ask about the predictions going into these playoff matches? And if you guys haven't been checking it out, Dust has been uploading a lot of fantastic content over on his own YouTube channel. He's done much more in-depth breakdowns of all 4 of these quarterfinal matchups. So when you're done here, if you want a little bit more in-depth analysis, go check those out. Link in the description down below. And before we get started, can you guys do me a solid? Take a second, leave a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Help me hit 10K subs by the end of the year. Thank you guys so much for the support during the major cycle, and especially for the support yesterday for Gunner's GoFundMe. We talked about this in our podcast, Hold the Angle, yesterday, but Gunner is a good friend of ours. He streams Counter-Strike with me almost every single night, and over the weekend, a tragedy struck where his house burnt down and he lost damn near everything. Since then, we've helped raise almost like $500 on top of what had already been raised on the GoFundMe, and that's fantastic to see. Thank you guys so much for that support, and once again, check the link in the description. If you can give anything to help Gunner in this trying time, even just some well wishes and some prayers, it helps out immensely. Thank you guys so much for that, and I'm so thankful for this community to be able to help someone in this trying time. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to go in order of the matchups as they are starting. So tomorrow we have Spirit versus MOUZ and then Furia versus Pain. So Dust, in my opinion, Spirit versus MOUZ has the potential to be the most competitive match of the quarterfinals. Going into this, what are your initial thoughts with this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, they've played each other twice this year already, and both of those series were indeed very, very close. Multiple maps that went into multiple overtimes or went the full distance of regulation. Really, the only one-sided factor was that Spirit crushed them on Dust 2 both times, but other than that, it was a toss-up, but Spirit came out on top 2-1 both times. I think really the only difference that this particular meeting seems different is that Spirit have looked in better form recently. MOUZ kind of labored their way into playoffs. Spirit had no problem getting there. So if you're going by recent form, maybe Spirit looks a little bit more attractive.
Yeah, that's where most people were thinking, is that MOUZ's form in the group stage was not really convincing, especially a lot of their interviews after the fact seemed to kind of reaffirm that. Just double check, I think you said Spirit won both those matches, but I'm pretty sure it was MOUZ that won, correct?
It was MOUZ, yes. Yeah, okay. MOUZ won 2-1 both times.
Yeah, so this year's MOUZ has won both the matchups since they've added Spinks and dropped Shuhei. One thing I want to start off first a little bit is actually the map veto. I'm almost convinced that this is going to be a duplicate veto to both times these teams have played, because they both prefer to just get rid of their permabans in Inferno and Anubis, and then they both just love playing Dust 2, Nuke, and Ancient. So I think we're going to see some combination of those 3 maps. I don't really see things, differentiating themselves from there.
No, I agree with you. I think the bans are pretty straightforward, as you said, with Spirit not playing Inferno and MOUZ Sports not playing Anubis. I think the only difference that you could see this time around is potentially someone trying to throw out the wild card of Train. I mean, when you have 2 back-to-back series against each other go the same result each time, you start to wonder if maybe someone wants to kind of change the variables a little bit to get a different outcome. And while I do think that Spirit would still likely be good to just go ahead and pick into Dust 2 and MOUZ, it makes all the sense in the world to go for Ancient, I do wonder just a little bit if somehow like a Train or a Nuke kind of finds its way into the series.
If I had to kind of float one thing that I think is interesting, I love the idea of trying to make a very interesting pick ban choice, maybe float your permaban necessarily, if you can get away with it. And I think it might be worth it if you're MOUZ to consider banning Dust 2, just because it's so definitively Spirit's best map. If it came down to it and you're like, we got Dust 2 out of here, and we had to play, Nuke and Ancient the first 2 maps, and then maybe Anubis on third, which isn't even a map Spirit likes to play that much either, I think it might be worth considering. I just think Dust 2 is just like, it feels like if you let Dust 2 in, it's a guaranteed win for Spirit. I don't know if you want to necessarily get away with that if you're MOUZ.
It's just tough because I think Anubis is a guaranteed win for Spirit too if you decide not to permaban it. I mean, they're 8-2 in their last 10 games on Anubis, and we've never seen MOUZ play it. So it's always risky, but in a high-stakes situation like this, it's really more on Spirit to kind of change the variables than MOUZ, because MOUZ have already proven that, hey, even if they let Dust 2 burn, they can find wins on the other 2 maps and still get through the series. So I do think that this is one of the hardest picks to read out of the playoffs, just because of how close the games have been. And, these are 2 top 4 teams in the world. And yes, we can talk about how MOUZ certainly struggled to make the playoffs, but that also shows a different trait of, resilience and the ability to come back, from under pressure. When you're down 0-2 in a major, to fight all the way back and get 3 BO3 wins in a row to get yourself in the playoffs, that does show some character in its own right.
That's true. I do think that more so than in previous matchups, I think Spirit should be the heavy favorite here. Not only just because of like previous form in this tournament, this might be a bias of mine. I brought this up when talking about my pick'ems with Vu. When it comes down to it, while MOUZ's spread of firepower is basically unignorable, Donk and Shiro are just so far ahead of Xerxes and Torzi, in my opinion. Like, they need to be able to limit Donk in some way, and the way Donk's play at this major, I feel like that's going to be more difficult than in previous matchups.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had the same argument where I think MOUZ has more well-distributed talent, whereas Spirit's a little bit more top-heavy, but that does also give them the highest ceiling when you have someone like Donk who just feels like he is unstoppable. You can never really consistently hold him down in any sort of way. And I think the other big thing that's helping Spirit out this time is very noticeable that Shiro has become a more aggressive opper. He's willing to go for a little bit more, and so that gives Spirit a little bit more than what they had the last couple times they played against MOUZ Sports. That could be one variable that is a change. That and just the recent form looking a little bit better. I do have Spirit out in front on this one, but it's not by much. I think it's like a 60-40, 55-45 type situation.
Yeah, I think regardless, we're looking at all 3 maps. I would give the edge to Spirit here 2-1. I think the big thing is that Nuke is probably pretty favored for MOUZ overall. If Spirit are going to get this win, they're going to take Dust 2 if it's picked and run away with it, more likely than not. Then they're going to have to win on Ancient. And Ancient's an interesting map for Spirit, where a lot of the times MOUZ have done a very good job of preventing Donk from owning mid on the T side. So that interaction specifically between Donk, Xerxes, and Brolin in the mid is probably going to be the most important factor in a game like that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Ancient, I think, is a tried and true map. Pretty much everyone kind of understands how to approach it, and so it just comes down to those mid-round decision-making moments, if you're able to find those big openings, and if you're able to find a read on your opponent. If it were me, and I'm trying to figure out how I think that Spirit will win this series, as you said, I think Dust 2 is the ticket, but I honestly think they have a better chance of flipping Nuke than they have flipping Ancient. They've just been in really good recent form on Nuke. They've won 6 out of their last 7 games. It's probably statistically their second best map after Dust 2, unless you want to count Train, but they've played it less times. So that, to me, that's what I think could really help them is flipping Nuke.
Yeah. Probably the other factor to point out is that probably the thing that's gone the worst for MOUZ here at the tournament is their opening kill attempt rates and success, especially in that Legacy series. I talked about this also. That game against Legacy was the biggest deficit in opening kills for a team to win all year, and maybe for the last 2 years or so. The data on that gets a little bit fuzzy, but it was they won that series while for all 3 games having a -26 opening kill differential, which is one goes to show crazy resilience to win that many rounds in basically 5v4s, but also that Xerxes and Brolin were really struggling to get their openers, and Donk is the best entry in the game. So that whole interaction with opening kills is going to be very pivotal for both teams.
No, I agree with you. I mean, Legacy choked that game. They were up 9-3. They should have won that game, and MOUZ shouldn't be in these playoffs. So, I mean, I don't want to harp on Legacy too much, because I think that what they were able to accomplish is incredible. I mean, they already gained a lot of credit and raised their stocks up quite a lot for what they were able to accomplish. But yeah, when you're in mat 3 of an elimination BO3 and you're up 9-3 from your CT side Nuke, and all you have to do is just find a way to get a handful to close it, that just goes to show the difference in experience and handling pressure, right? And so while I do think Legacy choked, also credit where it needs to be due. MOUZ, had the resilience. They were down 3-9. They found a way to grind a way back and win the game. And so, that's championship mentality right there. But that's also kind of leaning towards my argument where I do think there's a way for Nuke to be flipped in this matchup between Spirit and MOUZ.
Yep. Okay, so I think moving on, we're going to talk about Furia versus Pain as they're the next matchup on the docket. This one is going to be really hard to project because not only have these teams not played each other recently, they haven't played each other since either team have made their really drastic roster swaps. Obviously, Brazilian versus Brazilian games tend to be very, very different than pretty much kind of like how Chinese Counter-Strike, when they play against each other, is also radically different than kind of the European or American meta. These teams will just go at each other ruthlessly every single round. It's going to be very chaotic. And probably the first thing to point out is, will Mongolz be any different on a stage versus in a studio?
That's a good question. I think that had I have not seen what he did in Astana, I would tend to agree that being on the stage could see him kind of shrink a little bit. But I did see him handle his hometown crowd so effectively in Astana, like taking the mic from the interviewer, speaking to the crowd, and not really letting things phase him. So it's different, though, when it is a major and you're in unfamiliar territory, being in front of an American crowd who is probably going to be, fairly neutral in this, I would think. So that'll be interesting to see. And you're right. Like, these two teams, the only interaction they had was 1-BO1 in Stage 2 in a very close game on Dust 2 that did go the way of Pain. But outside of that, no other interactions. And honestly, these two teams are just hard to put a finger on because, obviously with Furia, they haven't played very many events since they went international. And then even for Pain, they've been through multiple roster changes and stand-in situations that knowing where they truly are form-wise is really tough to call. But both have already, really shown a lot. I didn't have either team making the playoffs in my pick'ems, and both of them did. So that in itself, I think, has been really neat to watch.
That is an interesting aside. I had both Fury and Pain making it through. That's because I really like both these teams. So maybe not so much analytics. It definitely feels over reels in that one, but at least I was vindicated in the end on both those picks. I guess getting one layer deeper is that the pick ban comparatively is actually much harder to parse through because there's no data. So looking at it, other than Furia are going to ban Ancient no matter what, Pain can kind of like pick or choose their ban and have quite a few options. I was thinking maybe Train, but like, I don't know, you could also maybe ban Anubis. There's a lot of ways to go for Pain in terms of what they want to ban in this series.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think they will ban Train. I think it's their weakest map. They've never won it. Even with the core of their team, they've never been able to get a win on Train. So that's my guess, as, Furia have clearly shown a very good strength on Train. It's their best map, you would argue. But that does leave the door open for Anubis, like you said, which is another map that Pain have had struggles with, if we're being 100% honest. So I think either way you go there, Furia's going to get a win. They're either going to get to pick Anubis or they're going to get to pick into Train or something like that. So I assume that's probably where things are going to go. And then for Furia, as you said, they're going to ban Ancient. There's no question there. And then it'll just come down to the picks, right? I think Pain, if I'm Pain, I'm probably looking at Dust 2. That's the map they played the most, and it's a map that Furia has shown some weakness on. Yep. But they also maybe could go a different direction and look into even something like Mirage, which is something that we've also seen Furia have some issues with here and there.
Yeah, if I had to guess, I think it's going to be like Dust 2, and then like Train or Anubis, whatever's like not banned by Pain, and then like a Mirage Decider, maybe a Nuke. But that seems to be kind of the clearest path for the veto. And given that, I would say Pain definitely. I would give Pain the edge on Dust 2. They've had some really great wins on it in this stage, where Davideus and DGT really stepped up. But what's going to be interesting to watch play out is how NQZ and Molodoy match up individually, and then how Yakindar does in terms of battling the entries. So this one's also going to be really close. It's actually a really hard series to predict, and kind of with the absence of data, it kind of feels like we have to kind of fall back to storylines. And as much as I like Pain as a team, the Furia story is just more enticing, right? So I want to give the deference that I think Furia making the semis is just kind of the cooler outcome.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think the other thing, too, is Furia just seem like they have their firepower in better form on a more consistent basis. Like, I think Molodoy has been fantastic considering he's come from obscurity and had really no LAN experience prior to when he played Astana for this team. And he's very aggressive. He's, very impactful. He's done really well with it. Queserado's maintained his form. Yuri's looked solid. Yakindar's playing much better than I think anyone would have anticipated. And he's actually been getting better and better on the T side every game that they play, right? And Fallen has looked pretty solid as a rifling IGL, in my opinion. Meanwhile, when I look at Pain, I feel like the only consistent pieces on that team are NQZ and then DGT, who just got there. But I really feel like Bugazera has not been the same fragging IGL he was last year for the bulk of this year. I think Snow's been kind of a bust, in my opinion. And Davideus, I think it's the X factor for me. He does represent a lot of potential in an aggressive rifling slot, and I feel like he did come up pretty big for them in some of those key games to get them the playoffs. but he's been a little bit hit or miss overall for the year. So that's where I tilt the edge to Fury. I feel like their players just look a little bit hotter right now.
Yeah, I think that matchup is going to be the most important one to watch. Is Davideus on the T side pushing into K Serato's bomb sites? Like how did those two play around each other? Like who's going to win that 1v1 is probably going to hinge a lot of rounds in this series if I had to wager.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fireworks, man. Both teams very brawly, very aggressive, very fast paced. So I think it's going to be a fun game to watch no matter how it ends.
So if you had to pick one of the two, are you leaning Furia then?
I am, just by a hair.
Right. That's what I'm thinking as well. And then I think moving on from there, we have pretty easily the most one-sided game in this bracket. If we had to wager, it's NAVI versus Vitality. There's not much to say. It feels like Coffee and Baby versus Atom Bomb levels of difference in skill here. I don't see how NAVI win a map.
Yeah, it is a little bit tough, isn't it? NAVI, the story of this year is a tough one because it's kind of funny how the baton's been passed, actually.
Yeah.
As Vitality are on the verge of having the first era in CS2 if they win this major. It'll give them their 7th title in a row, a major trophy, and they will have been the dominant team for the first half of 2025. And there's no question, hello, you've been living the Vitality era for that first half of 2025. But NAVI was that team last year.
Yep.
Had they have won the Shanghai major, they would have had the first, era in CS2. So it's funny how the turns table, so to speak. I just think it's a combination of NAVI having some of their individuals fall off with form. I think their map pool is also bottomed out. And it just seems like they're scrambling for a miracle. They even said as much whenever they exited Astana. Alexi B's in an interview like, well, I hope this boot camp works out because otherwise we're screwed. Like, that's basically what it sounded like he said. Yep. And so it goes back to that. Like, unless they figured out something in the kitchen, cooking up with Blade and Alexi B on how to counter Vitality in some way, yeah, I mean, they come into this as the heavy underdog. As you said, I don't really know a map where it's like, yeah, I think NAVI could beat Vitality here.
Yeah, I mean, listen, not to be like this blunt about it, but they could have Gordon Ramsay in that kitchen next to Blade and Alexi B, and they're not going to serve up anything good enough. Like, I don't even know where you go in this veto. You're trapped everywhere because every map you play, Vitality plays better. It's like, oh, you want to ban Dust 2? You're going to get just destroyed on Mirage and Nuke. You want to ban Mirage? Well, you're going to lose on Dust 2. I don't even know what you do to give yourself like a map where you feel confident on. Because what? Oh, you're going to play Train? Yeah, Vitality win that. You're going to play Anubis? They don't care. You could actually, Vitality could just never ban their perma, and you could play their perma ban, they probably would win it. Like, what are you going to do?
I mean, as bad as NAVI's Ancient has been this year in comparison to last year, yeah, I think even though Vitality don't play it, they probably still could beat them.
Yeah.
But anyway, look, I think for NAVI, your best bet, I do think Train's still in the cards just because it is such a wild card map. Like, we know there's several different teams that play the map pretty well, but it's not like anyone has just defined the meta. Like, pretty much everyone has some type of similar vibe on how they play it. So I think there's room for discovery on that map if you're really kind of focused on it. Mm-hmm. And so that could be an outside chance for NAVI. And then, yeah, the other one, like, you would say Anubis just because it's Vitality's least played map, but NAVI have been awful on Anubis this year.
Yeah.
They truly have not shown any comfort on that map whatsoever. And so, yeah, I just don't really see a way forward for NAVI here, considering just how good Vitality is. By the way, the streak's not dead. I refuse to accept it.
Yeah, we'll leave the format talks for after the major. I guess if I wanted to go even one hyperbolic limb further, and maybe I'll get burned on this, I would be shocked if NAVI get double-digit rounds on either map. Like, I feel like it's that bad. Like, Vitality tend to just win harder, especially against teams that aren't Falcons, MOUZ, or Spirit. I don't see how NAVI get 10 rounds. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see it either, but the funny thing to me is these teams haven't played against each other in almost a year.
That's
the
true.
last time they played against each other was Cologne, which is August of 2024, and Vitality won that BO 5-3-1, and that was before they obviously got Ross. That was back when they still had Spinks on the team.
Yes.
So, and some of those games were close, like overtimes were involved in those games.
Just
but
a
again,
very different NAVI, it feels like, just in terms of like individual output.
Both teams are very different, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that's what's interesting is that there really is no head-to-head history that matters anymore, right? And so this will be the first time they have to feel each other in a server in quite a long time. And again, I think Navi's really only hope here is if they get a couple of guys popping off, if Vitality comes in cold, and if they have some type of hard read that they've been working on studying the demos. But I think the problem with that is that Vitality is such a well-balanced team that they can adjust. You know, if a certain type of style is not working for them, if you have a certain read on them, they can just pivot how they play. And there's not many teams that have that same versatility and fluidity that Vitality have.
Yeah, and maybe this is like kind of the thing that defines ZywOo is that you can try and anti-strat ZywOo. ZywOo has to play bad for you to anti-strat him. Like, you can't just like design a trap for him. He will find a way to get 1 or 2 kills nearly every single time. Like, he's just the most, oh wait, he has 30 kills player of all time. Like, how do he get 30 kills? Well, he hit 1 or 2 literally every single round. So I just don't know how you contain that.
Yeah, we haven't seen a hybrid like ZywOo in a very long time. I mean, I think the fact that this guy is simultaneously one of the best oppers in the world and might be one of the best entry riflers in the world is crazy. The fact that he has that wide array of skills, and so he's never impacted by not having any economy. He's never impacted by being in a tough spot because he can just make plays happen no matter where he is. So yeah, he is just, I mean, he's battling Daunt for #1 in the world right now. His sidekick Rops is a top 5 player in the world as well. Yep. So they're just so well defined. The other big thing I was saying that I was thinking to myself, and I'll see what you think, is it's actually great. Like, Mezzi might be the best 4th best player on the team ever. Like, you know, like, because in theory, Mezzi's the 4th best player on the team with, you know, Flames and Rops and ZywOo. But if you line him up on like any other team, it's like 4th best player, so to speak. Like, he's way better than them. So it's just crazy how deep Vitality goes, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I feel like the only one you could really go to as a comparison is Xyp9x, and then I guess you just have to balance like different priorities between what the 2 players bring in terms of impact. I haven't really thought about it, but yeah, I don't hate that as a statement. It definitely seems, you know, pretty hard to argue against, at least currently. Yeah, I said this when I was doing the pick'ems with Vu. Is Vitality the best roster ever assembled? I think in terms of skill, probably yes. Like, I don't even think Astralis had 5 players, man for man, skill for skill, as good as the 5 players on Vitality. Will Vitality get the same amount of achievements as Astralis? That remains to be seen. But
the 3 majors in a row is going to be tough. But yeah, you're right. I do think we haven't seen a team this good since that Astralis team that you're referring to. Yeah, and that in itself is historical.
Yeah. All right, then moving on. We have one last game to talk about, and it's the game that everyone's looking forward to watching. It's Faze versus Mongolz. I want to just be dismissive and say Faze are winning and just kind of leave it at that. But obviously, it's not that easy. We don't know what the Mongolz are going to bring into a playoff environment. The big thing to point out is that obviously Faze beat them in 2-0 in the group stage in a best of 3. I guess the first place I want to go is Mongolz need to change up how they approach this veto, surely, right? They can't allow Ancient Anubis again.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, one thing that people haven't really noticed, I feel like, with Faze, because they've just been so enamored by their success, which is fair enough. They pretty much only have been playing Anubis and Ancient this entire tournament.
Sure.
Like, that's literally the only 2 maps they played the entirety of stage 3, right? Because they beat Aurora on Anubis, or lost Aurora on Anubis, rather. They beat MOUZ on Ancient, beat Legacy on Anubis, and then, yeah, they had Ancient Anubis against Mongolz. And then even in stage 2, like, they had the win over Heroic on Dust 2, but again, a lot of Anubis and Ancient was being played from them in that stage as well. So yeah, I do think that Mongolz probably need to be looking to get one of those. The only issue is they don't play Train. And so if you don't ban Train, that is a map that FaZe are certainly more than willing to pick against you if you leave it out in the open. So that's the only real problem with that. But yeah, you're right. It does feel like if one of those maps comes in, it could wind up being an auto loss. Although I still think Mongolz has a chance to beat FaZe on Ancient. Like, I think they have a good enough Ancient to be capable of beating FaZe in the right setting.
Yeah, I just think importantly, you kind of have to kind of take the lesser of 2 evils and pick one of them and get them off the board, right? Because I just don't, I think if you, or maybe you just have to maybe choose not to pick one of them in the first phase. Like, maybe you do just go ahead, you get rid of your perma regardless, and then instead of first picking Ancient, you first pick like a Mirage or a Nuke or a Dust 2. You got to take them somewhere else in the first game and then just, you know, accept the fact that you both play Anubis and Ancient maybe later on in the series. I think if you let them get both in the first 2 games, it just puts you so far in a disadvantage, especially before we even get to the fact that we all know the Mongolz love to choke in the playoffs. We don't know what their form is going to be like on stage when everybody in the world is rooting against them because everyone wants to see FaZe go deep in this major. So it's like, where do you go here? It feels like Mongolz in a lot of ways are trapped because Karrigan's going to find a way to make this veto hell.
Yeah, I think the issue is FaZe is more than likely to just ban Mirage, which means that would be the other map that I would take if I was Mongolz instead of Ancient. Like, you know, that has been their other really good map. I think the other option for Mongolz would be, okay, let's say it plays out the way we think, right? And Mongolz obviously just keep banning Train and FaZe is how they want to get Mirage. I think you go for Inferno at that point.
Yeah, that's
early.
not a bad call.
Get it out, like just to change it up a little bit, just to see if that might give you a better outcome. But it's one of those things where I feel like the core of Faze have been pretty good on Inferno, and the way that map plays out, it can be such like a. I mean, the only team that's really dominated it is Vitality. You know, it's one of those maps that really can just go either way. Like if your economy goes out of whack or you miss out on a couple of retake opportunities, you can just be behind the 8 ball very quickly. So that's the only pivot I could really see. But yeah, it kind of just goes back to the same story that Mongolz has been facing all year. And it's like, will your players show up on stage? Because so far, they really haven't. Like, this team has had some deep runs. They've had some big finishes. I think they are like the 5th best team in the world, which is a great place to be in. They had a breakthrough moment last year by making the Shanghai playoffs. I think that was a big moment for them. And I think Dallas was a big moment for them just before the major. The fact that they were able to push Vitality to the limits in a BO3, you know, beat Aurora, you know, push MOUZ to their limits in a BO3 as well. I think those were positive signs, but still some other key players have not shown up in some big playoff games, and this is a big playoff game. You're up against a really hot Faze, you know, for a major, right? To get further in a major than you've ever been before. And I just don't know how they're going to handle that pressure.
And not just, you know, not just any Faze, it's Faze in the playoffs. Like, the mythology around Faze in the playoffs is not without data to back it up. For whatever reason, they are just a team that seem to be different in this specific environment. So I don't know, man. It feels like this series is either going to be 2-0 one-sided Faze, or it's going to be a 2-1 I'm going to age 30 years, and then Faze are still going to win. Like, Faze are either going to make this the ugliest win or the easiest win. I don't see Mongolz win condition.
Mongolz win condition is just have your stars show up finally on the stage. You know, we saw a little bit of this, I feel like, in Dallas, where 9-10 actually did have a pretty solid game against MOUZ Sports in that loss. It's just, for me, it's Senzu. Yeah. Like, Senzu is such a good rifler, man. He's one of the most prolific, aggressive riflers that we've had in Counter-Strike for the last couple of years.
Just disappears.
He disappears in the playoff games, and Blitz can too. Blitz is the fragging IGL. He's like always the guy that we talk about. When we talk about fragging IGLs, Blitz is the first thing to come off your list as like, yeah, this dude is super skilled in this IGL slot. But even he can sometimes fall off in these big moments. Funnily enough, the guy who doesn't really fall off is Mizzino. Mizzino's like the one guy that kind of stays the same no matter what.
Techno tends to rise up, actually, if anything else.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, like, if they can finally have that mental breakthrough where Senzu's able to show up and play at the level we know he's capable of, and the rest of the guys just kind of fall in line to some degree of what they're used to, then I think Mongolz could grind out a win here. Like, I don't think it's some foregone conclusion that Faze is definitely going to win. I think, you know, similar to the Pain Furia match, I think there is, you know, some shakiness here that Mongolz might be able to finally capitalize on, but it's just Faze have looked so hot, right? Like, Simple had a magical stage 3. Legion Frozen are looking solid. Rain's doing his same old BS where he doesn't play well for a long time, then shows to a major and starts playing pretty well. So it just feels like the magic's kind of in the air for Faze, but I wouldn't be surprised if Mongolz finds some way to silence it.
Yeah, Mongolz could win. It would be a remarkable upset. It wouldn't be without, like, foundation or without precedence, I guess. Overall, though, I'm taking Faze to win, and I'm expecting 3 games because Faze winning games easily is not something they do ever. So I'm expecting this one to age me a little bit.
Yeah, I agree.
And then we could talk about the semifinals after that, but it's kind of hard to project because we don't know the matchups. We'll save that for another time. I really just wanted to talk about the quarterfinals specifically and get your thoughts, Dust. You guys have this as a video the day before the action starts. We'll recap it as it happens. Overall, I don't know about you. I think this is the most exciting major in a while.
It is a great playoffs. I mean, yeah, you'd wish that Falcons didn't burn things in stage 2 and they were still in this because they were playing so well prior to the major, and that would have given you, you know, all top 4 teams in the world in the bracket. But we still have a pretty cool bracket, right? Like, we still have, you know, MOUZ, Spirit, and Vitality, who are all, you know, top 4 teams in the world. Mongolz, I think, was coming in ranked number 5 in my opinion. So you got them, you got the cool Faze story going on, and then I think Pain and Furia are also pretty cool stories, and at least one of those teams is going to make a top 4 finish in a major, which is pretty incredible considering the position that both these organizations were in just a few months ago. To all of a sudden now one of them is going to be a top 4 in a major team. That is pretty crazy, right? So yeah, I think this is a fun bracket to follow for sure.
All right, if you guys enjoyed this kind of pregame content, you can show me by leaving a like, leaving a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Most importantly, top link in the description, go check out Dust. He's been putting out fantastic major prep content all along the Austin Major. You can also catch him on the desk, both at Blast and PGL. He's one of the best analysts in the scene, and it's glad to see him getting so much more work now that we're into CS2 and we're opening up the major circuit a lot more. Dust, it was fantastic to have you on again, and hopefully we can see you again soon with some more collaborations in the future.
Absolutely, dude. Just hit me up anytime.
For sure. All right, thank you guys for watching. Channel members, thank you so much. And once again, a big thank you for you guys for helping out Gunner with the GoFundMe. He saw all your well wishes in the comments yesterday, and it was really appreciated. If you managed to donate some money, I'm infinitely thankful for you guys to be able to do that. It's just nice to know that this community can come together and help people out. We've done it twice now, which is, you know, kind of insane to think about. But hopefully we continue to do it when it does happen, because I want this to be a positive space when Counter-Strike can oftentimes be severely negative. Thank you guys so much for that. Follow me on Twitch, Twitter, all that good stuff, and I'll catch you guys soon with another video. Peace.